Stonehenge, the ancient mystery we still can't explain. If you enjoy the content, please consider subscribing and liking the video. It truly helps the channel grow and continue to create contents like this. There's something about Stonehenge that hits you before you even know any of the history. You can see a picture of it, just a picture, and it already feels ancient, mysterious, almost otherworldly. Those giant stones standing in a circle on a quiet plain. They look like they're waiting for something. Or guarding something. Stonehenge has this presence, this gravity, like it's more than just a monument. And the crazy thing is, the more you learn about it, the stranger it becomes. You know what gets me right away? We grow up thinking Stonehenge is this old, cool, slightly weird-looking pile of rocks someone arranged a long time ago. But then you learn it's over 4,500 years old, older than the pyramids of Egypt, older than most countries, older than the concept of history as we know it, and suddenly you're like, okay, who builds something that massive and precise at that time, and why? Because that's the real mystery of Stonehenge. It's not just that it exists, it's that it shouldn't be able to exist at the level of engineering it represents. Picture this, massive stones, some weighing as much as 25 tons, dragged across miles and miles of land. And the bluestones? Those came from Wales, over 150 miles away. Imagine trying to move something the size of a truck by hand over hills, rivers, bogs, forests, without wheels, without cranes, without metal tools, without GPS telling you that you're 0.2 miles off course. These people didn't have an instruction manual. They had a vision, and they had determination. But why that location? Why that shape? Why those stones? Let's start with the shape. Stonehenge isn't just a random circle. It's aligned with astonishing precision to astronomical events, particularly the summer and winter solstices. That means whoever built it wasn't just thinking in terms of geography, they were thinking in terms of the sky. They were tracking the movements of the sun, maybe even the moon. They understood cycles, they understood seasons, and they built something permanent to mark those cycles. If you stand inside Stonehenge on the summer solstice, the sun rises perfectly over the heelstone, casting a beam of light straight into the heart of the monument. That alignment wasn't accidental. That was intentional design. That was purpose. And when you look at the stones themselves, you realize this wasn't just a matter of dragging boulders into a circle. The stones were shaped, carved, smoothed. Some of them fit together with joints, actual mortise and tenon joints like what you'd find in fine woodworking. Except here, they're carved in stone. That's craftsmanship. That's engineering. That's a level of precision, requiring planning and skill. And they didn't do this with bronze chisels or iron tools. They did it with stone hammers. Think about that. Using one stone to shape another stone into a perfect architectural joint. And then raising those stones into place. Some over 20 feet tall, and balancing horizontal stones, lintels, on top of them. It's like they were building a giant puzzle, except each piece weighed as much as a small elephant. And here's the part that always makes me stop and stare. Nobody knows exactly why. We have theories: ritual site, burial ground, astronomical calendar, healing center, or some combination of all of those. But no one left a guidebook. Whoever built Stonehenge wasn't trying to impress future generations with an explanation. They weren't carving instructions or stories into the stones. They weren't leaving written messages. They were building something that they understood, something that served a purpose in their worldview. And maybe that's the part that fascinates us the most. Stonehenge feels like a puzzle whose missing pieces are locked in time. We can see the stones, we can measure them, date them, analyze them, but we can't ask the people who built it what they were thinking. There's this scene I always imagine when thinking about Stonehenge. Picture a group of Neolithic builders, people who lived off the land, who understood nature intimately. They're standing in the open plain at dawn, watching the sun rise. Maybe they're tracking where it hits the horizon. Maybe they're marking locations with wooden posts, planning out a future that's bigger than themselves. They're working on something that will outlast their lives, outlast their children, outlast their entire culture. And they must have known that. People don't build something like Stonehenge for short-term gain. They build it for meaning. Now let's talk about the deeper layers of the site, because Stonehenge isn't just the iconic circle of stones we're used to seeing. That's only part of the story. Archaeologists have found evidence of massive earthworks surrounding the area, a circular ditch and bank that form a big enclosure. And beyond that, burial mounds, cremated remains, human bones, animal bones, tools, offerings. Stonehenge wasn't just a monument, it was a complex, a spiritual landscape, a place where people returned over generations for rituals, gatherings, ceremonies. It might have been a place of life and death, maybe even a pilgrimage site. And here's the part that adds a whole new layer of mystery. Stonehenge took over 1,500 years to build. Let that sink in. Different generations added different phases. Some stones were rearranged. Some structures were abandoned. This wasn't one project. This was a tradition, something passed down over centuries. Imagine a building project that your great-great-great-great-grandchildren finish. That alone tells you how important it must have been. Now, one of the wildest things about Stonehenge is the transportation of the blue stones. These smaller, but still extremely heavy stones came from the Preseli Hills in Wales. That's 150 miles away, and these stones came first, before the larger sarsen stones sourced locally. That means the earliest builders already had an incredible system for transporting heavy materials across long distances. How did they do it? Logs, sledges, rafts, ice roads? The theories are everywhere, but none of them feel entirely satisfying. Because you picture the terrain, rivers, hills, uneven ground, and then imagine dragging stones that weigh up to 4 tons. The sheer human effort is staggering. The coordination, the planning, the motivation. They weren't building houses. They weren't building defensive walls. They were building a circle of stones, something symbolic, something sacred. And maybe that's why people feel such an emotional reaction when they visit Stonehenge. It's more than a historical site. It's a message carved into the landscape, a message from a culture that didn't write anything down but still found a way to speak across millennia. Now here's another detail that gets overlooked. Stonehenge wasn't isolated. The entire surrounding landscape was filled with ancient structures, wooden circles, pathways, mysterious pits, burial mounds. It's almost like Stonehenge was just the central monument in a much larger ceremonial network. And then there's the avenue, a long, straight pathway leading to the river, aligned perfectly with the midsummer sunrise. That feels intentional. That feels ceremonial. Like people walk this path as part of a ritual, following the sun's journey. Imagine hundreds of people walking together, chanting, carrying torches, maybe wearing ceremonial clothing. Following a path laid out generations before them, Stonehenge was alive, it was used, it was functional. It wasn't an abandoned monument until much later. And here's a question that I think about all the time. How did they decide where to put the stones? Did they have a master builder, a spiritual leader, a council? Did they test alignments with wooden posts before committing to stone? The precision with which the stones are aligned suggests someone or some group knew exactly what they were doing. That's the part that gets overlooked. We imagine prehistoric people as primitive, but Stonehenge proves they weren't. They were astronomers, engineers, architects, ritual specialists, philosophers. They understood the land, they understood the sky, and they understood symbolism. You look at those stones today, and you can still feel that intelligence, that intention, that awareness of something bigger than themselves. And maybe that's what draws people to Stonehenge even now. It's this massive, silent reminder that humans have always searched for meaning, always looked to the heavens, always tried to understand their place in the world. Stonehenge is not a ruin. It's a question that's been standing in the wind for thousands of years. So let's step back onto that windswept plain and stand inside the circle again. Because the deeper you go into Stonehenge, the more it stops feeling like just an old ruin and starts feeling like a conversation with the past. We left off with the big question: how did they actually build this thing? Not as a diagram in a textbook, but in real life, with mud under their feet, rain in their faces, and nothing but rope, wood, muscle, and stubbornness. Picture hundreds of people hauling a 4-ton bluestone across rough ground. Their hands are blistered, clothes soaked, the sky that soft gray you can almost smell. Someone is shouting rhythm. Someone else is steering the sled, Kids are running alongside. Elders stand on the hill watching the progress. This isn't just construction, it's ceremony. Every pull of the rope is an act of belief. One of the coolest things about Stonehenge is that it forces you to respect the intelligence of people who lived thousands of years ago. We throw words around like primitive, but look at what they pulled off. They understood leverage, friction, weight, the way soil collapses under pressure. Maybe they couldn't write equations, but they could read the land, and they pushed that knowledge right up to its limits. Take the trilithons, those tall pairs of uprights with a horizontal stone on top. To raise one of those, they had to dig deep foundation pits, tilt the uprights in, brace them, then somehow lift a huge lintel high enough to drop it perfectly onto the joints they'd carved. If the balance was off, the whole thing could topple and kill people. So they planned, they rehearsed, they had specialists whose reputations probably lived or died with each successful lift. And then there's the alignment. The more you study the layout, the more the sky starts to feel like a quiet co-architect. The outer circle, the inner horseshoe, the heel stone, the processional avenue, all of them point toward key moments in the solar year, especially the summer and winter solstices. On the longest day, the sun rises in a very specific window. On the shortest day, it sets in the opposite one. Imagine standing there thousands of years ago, watching that disk of light slide into place between carefully arranged stones, knowing your people locked that moment into the landscape. That would have felt like proof that the world had an order and that you understood it. Stonehenge becomes less of a random monument and more of a permanent promise. The light comes back, the seasons turn, life continues. But Stonehenge doesn't sit alone. The surrounding area is full of other ancient features: long barrows, burial mounds, timber circles, paths etched into the soil. There was even a massive structure of wooden posts, sometimes called woodhenge. Stone and wood might not just be different materials, they might have carried different meanings. Some archaeologists think wood was for the living, for things that grow and decay, while stone was for the ancestors, for what endures. If that's even close to true, you can start to imagine whole ritual journeys. Maybe people gathered first at a wooden circle, a place buzzing with life and movement. From there, they followed the avenue toward the river, carrying offerings or the bones of the dead. They walked in rhythm with the sun, ending at the stone circle, the realm of permanence. Fire, chanting, smoke curling up between the stones, ashes buried in the earth, while the sun dropped exactly where it was supposed to, between the uprights. The landscape itself becomes part of the ceremony, and there really were burials here. The area around Stonehenge holds one of the largest clusters of prehistoric cremation burials in Britain. Not everyone got that honor. This wasn't a casual graveyard. It seems reserved for people who mattered in some way: leaders, ritual specialists, or individuals tied to whatever was going on here. Their remains were placed in pits and mounds around the circle, so the dead literally surrounded the stones, and the stones, in turn, surrounded the living during ceremonies. What makes it even stranger is that some of those people weren't local. Chemical traces in their teeth show they grew up in other parts of the island, maybe even beyond. That means Stonehenge pulled people in from far away. In a world without cars or maps, people still chose to travel for days or weeks to reach this place. It wasn't just important, it was magnetic. And yet, for all that effort, there comes a moment when the story changes. The building stops. The burials stop. The rituals fade. Stonehenge is still there, but the culture that created it moves on. Maybe new beliefs rise. Maybe the climate shifts and people head elsewhere. Maybe some slow social change just makes the monument feel less relevant. Whatever the reason, one generation doesn't pass the full story on to the next, and suddenly, the meaning starts to thin out. I always imagine that last generation that really knew the rituals, the elders who could still point at each stone and tell you what it meant and which song to sing when the sun touched that edge of the horizon. And then maybe there's a winter that's especially hard, or a leader who dies without an apprentice, or a migration that happens a little too quickly. A festival is skipped, a path gets overgrown, A story isn't told one last time, and that's all it takes. A world can forget even its most sacred place. Centuries pass. Sheep graze between the fallen stones. Travelers ride by and stare. Stories shift. Some say giants placed the stones. Others blame long-gone wizards or ancient kings. Nobody really knows, but everybody can feel it. This place isn't ordinary. And that's where we come in. Modern people with drones and scanners and dating techniques, walking around with hard hats and notebooks, trying to reverse engineer a vanished belief system from holes in the ground and patterns in the dirt. Ground-penetrating radar reveals hidden pits and avenues. LiDAR strips away the modern landscape to show ghost lines of long-erased structures. Suddenly, we realize Stonehenge wasn't just a circle. It was the center of a vast ceremonial complex. Even so, the core questions remain stubborn. What did it mean to stand there for them? Was it a calendar? A giant clock for crops and festivals? Was it primarily about the dead, about ancestors watching over the living? Or was it a classroom without walls, where each year's sunrise and sunset taught the next generation about the rhythm of the world? I think the real answer might be all of the above. Human beings rarely do anything important for just one reason. Stonehenge could have been a funeral ground, a gathering place, a cosmic marker, and a symbol of identity all at the same time. If you were born into that culture, you didn't debate its meaning. You felt it in your bones. That, to me, is the most powerful thing about Stonehenge. We can calculate alignments and measure stone weights all day, but what hits you when you really sit with it is the emotional weight. People who had almost nothing by our standards chose to invest staggering amounts of time and energy into shaping this one place. They could have spent all that effort on bigger houses or better defenses. Instead, they carved their anxiety and their hope into stone. And somehow, that choice still reaches us. You can be a person in a modern car on a modern highway, earbuds in, notifications buzzing on your phone. And if you pull over and step near those stones, everything goes quiet for a second. Your brain recognizes something older than every story you know. You don't have to understand it to feel it. Stonehenge proves that meaning can outlast memory. The beliefs are gone. The language is gone. The names of the builders are gone. But the feeling survives. Those stones still say, "We were here. We cared about something bigger than ourselves. We wanted the sky and the earth and our short human lives to line up, even if just for a moment." So when we talk about the mystery of Stonehenge, sure, we're talking about how they hauled the stones and why they lined them up with the solstice. But on a deeper level, we're talking about us, about humans, about this strange, persistent urge to take the invisible things we feel, time, loss, awe, hope, and turn them into something solid. We may never get the full, clean explanation historians dream of. Stonehenge will probably always keep a piece of its secret. But maybe that's part of the design. Maybe it was never meant to be easily explained. Maybe it was meant to be felt. And the fact that, thousands of years later, people still travel from all over the world just to stand in the same spot and stare at the same stones. That's the final act of the story. The monument is still doing its job. It's still pulling us out of our routines, making us look up at the sky, making us feel small and connected at the same time. In its own way, that might be the clearest message Stonehenge has left us. Civilizations rise and fall, languages appear and vanish, but the human desire to find meaning in the turning of the seasons and the path of the sun never really goes away. We're still that same species, still walking out onto the plain, still asking the sky the same old questions. The stones haven't answered yet, but they're still listening. And maybe that is the quiet punchline to the whole mystery. We thought we were coming to solve Stonehenge, to crack it open like a locked box and pull out a neat definition. But the longer you look at it, the more it feels like Stonehenge is studying us instead, watching to see what each generation chooses to believe about it. Every new theory says as much about the people proposing it as it does about the stones themselves. And the circle just keeps standing there, patient, steady, letting time spin around it.